Ajit sir. Our principal father, Scottie PD, has joined us. Hearty welcome, father. Hearty welcome, father. Father Scottie PD.
Thank you, Professor Emia. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, Professor Dr. Sebastian, for your goodwill to share your views with the team of scholars and teachers, and also who are seeking for the welfare of our country.
Thank you, Father. It's an opportunity for me to interact with your team. Thanks for asking me.
Okay.
May we begin, father, on time? Shall we begin, father?
Yes, we shall begin, Ramya.
Yes, sir. Thank you, father. Hearty welcome to all of you and a great day. Good afternoon. It is indeed a big day, a great day for the Department of History. We were doing a lot of direct programs. This due to this changing situations, due to a lot of complexities that are rising. We wanted to keep our students engaged and also have a better contact with academicians all over India. So this is a program where I had registrations from all the states of India as well as from 3 foreign nations. So it's indeed a historic moment for the Department of History, Christi Jayanti College. So I would like to begin our session with a silent prayer. I request all of you to observe 30 seconds of silence for prayer. Thank you. Respected Father Scottie PD, our principal, our resource persons for the day, our Professor D. Subhachandran, honorable professors of this institution, as well as from all the states of India, and my colleagues, students, and all. Hearty welcome to each and every one of you. Allow me to begin this session with a short introduction about Christi Jayanti College. The educational journey of this college began in 1999. Our institution is managed by the members of St. Joseph Province of Carmelites of Mary Immaculate, CMI, an indigenous religious congregation started by Saint Kuriakose Elias Chavra. We are an autonomous institution. We are affiliated to Bengaluru North University, and we were accredited and re-accredited with A grade. That was the highest in 2015. We are looking forward for the third cycle of accreditation. We have been continuously rated as one of the best colleges of India, as the best emerging college of the century by India Today survey, and we are being ranked in the National Institutional Ranking Framework. We are one of the, I think we are the private unaided college who has found a place in the NARF ranking in 2019 as well as in 2020, and all credit goes to the hard work of our principal, Father Scottie PD, and the teamwork of all the faculty and management of this institution. Our institution constantly keeps upskilling of our students through various academic programs. Even in these challenging times, we have been organizing several virtual conferences and FGP. Around 60 programs have been done so far, and this is the second program of Department of History. So on behalf of the Department of History, I take it's my privilege to welcome each and every one of you. I welcome Father Scottie PD, our principal and mentor, our resource person of the day, Professor D. Subhachandran, our Dean, our School of Conflict and Security Studies. I would like to welcome our father to give us the introductory remarks.
Thank you, Professor Remya, for your encouraging words and also the welcome note. Good afternoon, everybody. Honorable Professor Subhachandran, Professor and Dean, School of Conflict and Security Studies, NIS, Indian Institute of Science Campus, Bengaluru. Professor Kobaguma, Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Christu Jayanti College. Professor Selvaraj Michael, Coordinator for the Department of Social Sciences and Languages. Professor Remya, Head of the Department of History. Professor Mango, Assistant Professor in the Department of History. Dear delegates from different parts of our country, teachers, scholars, research personnel, and my student community who are searching knowledge and wisdom for the welfare of our nation and for the society. I am very happy to join you during this session of the two-day webinar on Indian strategic relations in post-COVID world order. We all feel that COVID-19 has made a real change in the world. Some people say the world has come upside down. What is considered to be great, what is considered to be progress, what is considered to be strength may not be considered with that importance nowadays. And also we used to tell it is before COVID-19, during COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. And it is right and fitting that we are having this session, webinar on post-COVID world order regarding Indian strategic relations. The present day is witnessing a major disruption on the established norms, practices and regulations throughout the world. There is a compulsive impact and change on society, economy and polity. The International Monetary Fund predicts 3% contraction of the world economy in 2020, which is the largest contraction after depression of the 1930s. The pandemic is also expected to leave us with a thoroughly different world. We are witnessing areas of cooperation as well as areas of conflict. On one side, countries and scientists are working together to contain the spread of virus by developing vaccine. On the other hand, there is war of words, war of weapons, and border skirmishes reported at many parts of the world. Our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said in an interview, I quote, "Foreign policy begins at home. A strong economy allows us to be heard in the world. A self-reliant India will have more to offer to the world," unquote. The current geopolitical status of our country in South Asia and the world is evolving. We are probably fostering a new strategic partnership or finding strategic partners and could be distancing ourselves from few traditional allies too. The Department of History of Christ Jayanti College had organized during the last academic year 24 academic programs in relevant themes, networking with the different institutions and scholars from different parts of our country and also at international level. And to the credit of the department, every year they release a student magazine also to empower the student community to think beyond the lines, to go beyond the classrooms and to identify the real situation of the society in the past, in the present, and also with a dream for the future. And it is called Scrolls from the department, the magazine. I convey my best wishes to the organizers of this webinar on a relevant topic, that is on strategic relations of our country in the post-COVID world. And together with all the participants and together with the Christ Jayanti academic family, I appreciate Dr. Gopakumar, the Dean, for all the motivation to all the departments in the deanery, and Professor Selvaraj Michael for your untiring guidance for all the activities in the as the coordinator of the social science and the language departments. And I appreciate Professor Ramya for her untiring efforts as the head of the Department of History, along with that, as the secretary for the IQAC cell of Christ Jayanti College, and also the staff secretary for the Teachers Council, for taking the lead in the growth of the college at various levels, not only for the department, humanities, deanery and the history department, but also for the entire college. And her dynamic leadership, her inquisitive mind, precise mind to look into quality and excellence, always together with the team members in the department, always guide the student, the teachers, and also network with the similar-minded people from different institutions and from the different parts of the society and the research scholars to have a better contribution and to find real meaning for our existence as teaching members of teaching fraternity. Appreciating Professor Ramya for your continuous effort and also for leading to organize this webinar for the welfare of all the participants, supported by Professor Humango, the assistant professor in the department, for organizing this. Appreciating you, I am happy to welcome once again all the participants. Dear participants, I appreciate your seeking of knowledge and wisdom, your dreams for our country. And also, this clearly shows we all are responsible citizens to visualize, to dream, and also to be a part of making our country great at the international level and also at the top of all the nations. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can make a country, we make our country the greatest in the world, even in the post-COVID world. May this webinar and the dynamic presence of Professor Subhachandran with his academic scholarship and also with the social commitment and with your teams will definitely encourage, inspire all of us during this session, I am sure, and appreciating his valuable presence and valuable presence of all the delegates. I remain. May God bless you. Have an enriching and empowering time with the Kristi Jayanti History Department and all the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father. Your words indeed set a right note of beginning for this webinar. Every day we are hearing about how the world is changing and how the contemporary structure is changing, how the global architecture is changing, and how certain big powers are losing their legitimate place, and how new world order is emerging. So the question is this a moment of opportunity for India to prove its capacity, leadership, and vision? Are we ready to emerge as the champion of South Asian nations? Are we ready to promote international cooperation and peace? Or will we be dragged into an uneasy war and peace situation? So there are so many questions. To answer this and more, we have Professor Subhachandran with us today. But before inviting him to talk, I invite my colleague, Professor Himango, to formally introduce our chief guest of the day to the participants. So over to Himango, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. To learn is a joy uncounted for, and that joy brings or comes to anyone who's a willing soul. Good afternoon, one and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce the speaker for today's session, Professor D. Subhachandran, who has an illustrious career in teaching, research, writing, and as an editor. Professor Subhachandran currently is the Dean at the School of Conflict and Security Studies, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. He heads two programs at the Institute, Conflict Resolution and Peace Research Program and Science Diplomacy Program. He is also the editor of two online weeklies, The World This Week and Conflict Weekly. His primary focus areas are Pakistan, Afghanistan, armed conflicts, and peace processes in South Asia. On Pakistan, he edits Pakistan Reader, Evening Brief, and E-Brief published every day. He also manages three portals, Global Politics, Conflict Reader, and Pakistan Reader, where young scholars regularly contribute. He also runs an internship program for young scholars. Sir is an associate at the Pakistan Study Research Unit, University of Durham, UK. Earlier, he was also a visiting fellow at the Department of Peace Studies, University of Bradford, UK, and the Arms Control, Disarmament and International Security at the University of Urbana-Champaign and Pakistan Studies Program, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Sir holds a PhD in International Relations from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and a master's degree in Political Science from Madras Christian College, Chennai. Sir was also the director at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi, until 2015. So it is indeed a pleasure to have you with us. And on behalf of the management of Kristi Jayanti College and the Department of History, I welcome you once again. And we are eagerly waiting for you to share your thoughts with us. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Principal, Professor Ramya, and other professors and scholars who are there today listening to me. Thanks for inviting me to talk to you on this subject of India's strategic relations in the post-COVID world order. It's an interesting subject because it's a developing subject. You know, we don't know whether we are already into the post-COVID world order. We don't know whether the COVID is over. You know, we are still in the process of addressing the challenges posed to us by COVID. Yeah. So talking about post-COVID world order means that there was a world order before the COVID, and then there is going to be a world order after COVID, with COVID being the partition, maybe 2010s and then 2020s. Let's start with that assumption. So, in 2010s, there was a world order, and then in 2020s, there would be a world order that would be shaped by whatever is happening in 2020. That is the COVID. So my lecture today would be on 4 parts. I'm just trying to do with 4 parts and 4 hypotheses. In the first section, I want to look at how the world order changed in the last 100 years. Yeah. From, let us say, let's not go too backwards. Let's start from the First World War, last 100 years. Let's see how the world changed in the last 100 years. And then that's my part 1. And then in part 2, let's look at how the world changed in this decade, the last decade, from 2011 to 2020, or on the day of the new year, 1st January 2020. What was the world order looking like? Yeah. And then let's look into what would the post-COVID world look like in 2021 onwards. Yeah. And then in the last section, let us look at what are the challenges that this change is posing to India's strategic relations. Yeah. I hope that is all right with you in terms of how I have divided this into 4 sections. Though I may focus a little at the end on India's strategic relations, maybe during Q&A, let's discuss more, because without realizing what is happening to the world order, we may not be able to appreciate what India can do with that world order. Yeah. Now, my first section, which is how the world order changed in the last 100 years. My hypothesis is 2. 1, since the last 100 years, the world has been changing. Yeah, there is no question about it. So that's the easiest hypothesis that I can make. The second hypothesis is that most of the time, the change was by disruption than by design in the last 100 years. Especially when we study international relations, I look at how the First World War brought an end to an European order that was existing until 1999 and brought US into the fold. And then how the disruptions of the First World War led to the great economic depressions of the 1920s and the 30s. And then the Second World War, how the Second World War brought a totally new world order. I'm sure both the students of history, political science, and international relations, when we were following history and IR during the 80s and the 90s, one of the common starting point would be during the post-World War II. So the World War II became a major starting point for many of us. Yeah. And then came the nuclear weapons, and then the response by the Soviet Union, and then the breakout of Cold War. If you ask me, 1962, the divide between US and Soviet Union as could be seen in Cuba, another disruption. Cold War as one major disruption. Then people started talking about Cold War period. During the Cold War period, this happened, that happened. So Cold War was one marker. It's not a design, it's a disruptor, And then came 1991, the disintegration of Soviet Union. Yeah. Then people who are in the current batch of scholars who are studying world history or international relations, they started talking about the post-Cold War period, defining the 1991 and after. Yeah. So 1991 as a marker. Then came 9/11 in 2001. Yeah, the attack on the US. Again, another disruptor. Today, many of us, until COVID, people have been talking about post 9/11 period, post 9/11 world. Yeah. So 9/11 was another great marker and a disruptor as well. Now, today, we are talking about COVID. As I told you, I'm not sure whether we are in the post-COVID phase. Suppose if I'm giving this lecture 2 years later, perhaps I would be talking about the post-COVID world order or post-COVID, because COVID would have changed, or hoping that the COVID would change. So my hypothesis in this is the world has been changing in the last 100 years. And the change in most of the time has happened not because we designed to change. It was some disruption that changed the world. None of us were prepared for the change. I don't know how the world looked at for India on 1992. In fact, we were, if you ask our foreign ministry after the disintegration of Soviet Union, That was a major challenge to India. What to do in the world order? Until now, you had Soviet Union that was supporting us. So no, we were doing something. Suddenly, there is no world order. No, there's no Soviet Union. Yeah. So disruption has been the norm in the last 100 years in terms of shaping the world order into the next one. So I stop my first section and my first hypothesis here. Now I'll move to the second section, where I want to talk to you about the 2010s, the last decades, 2010 to 2019 or 2020, January 1st of 2020. My hypothesis for this section is there was change during the last decade. There were some transitions and there were some transformations. I'm sure you would be able to appreciate the difference between transition and the transformation. Both was taking place in the 2010s, in the last decade. Let me give you few, 7 or 8 points, what I consider as the major developments in the last 10 years, 2010 to 2020 or 2019. Number one, people have been talking about globalization, but the globalization that we saw in the last 10 years is nothing like the globalization we saw in the previous 2 decades. We have been talking about globalization in the 1990s, 2000s, and the 2010s. But the globalization we saw in 2010s, from 2010 to 2019, was quite remarkable in terms of the following: the movement of goods, the movement of labor, the movement of investment, the movement of technology, the movement of idea. You look at all these movements, I am not sure. Then we can say, there was McDonald in before 2010, but I come from a town in South Madurai. I would have never expected a KFC or a McDonald or all those things in 10 years before or 15 years before. The pace in which globalization took and the intense route that it had was amazing. The movement of labor, the one example that I would always tell is, many of the Tamils are a great Rajinikanth fans. Yeah. And I watched a Rajinikanth movie after having dosa in Saravana Bhavan. Saravana Bhavan is one of the major food joints. You would ask me, what is the big deal about, watching a Rajinikanth movie after having dosa in Saravana Bhavan? No, I did all these 3 sitting in San Francisco. You understand what I'm telling, that the first show of a movie being released in San Francisco, and then there is Saravana Bhavan, meaning that much of South Indians there in that place, and the movie getting screened. So this is what the globalization that I'm talking about. The globalization of the 2010s, though I was trying to put it in a simple words, it was never the case in the last 2 decades. Now the second one, the second rise, let me talk about, is the rise of China. Undoubtedly, the rise of China in the last 10 years. We did, at least I did, visit a few cities in the east. There was one city called Hangzhou. In 2012 or 2013, in one of my meetings, I had an interview with one of those business community leaders. So the business community in Hangzhou is a city, but it's not a big city. I asked him, so what? It's a trading city. According to the business community in Hangzhou, they said by 2025, they wanted one Chinese good in every household at the global level, produced in Hangzhou, not in China. Yeah, you look at the way that China, a businessman in Hangzhou, a city. China, by the way, Hangzhou is neither Beijing nor Shanghai. It's not as big as Shanghai or Guangzhou or Beijing. But it's not a small city either. But then somebody in 2013 thinking about, having one Chinese item in every household across the world. And then I was fortunate last year, just before COVID outbreak took place, I was there for a month in China. And then I happened to meet again the business community people. And then I asked the same question, referring to the earlier question. And then I asked, so in the last 5 years, what do you think is the big change? And now the business community was telling, we want one Chinese item, but not just alone in every household. We want every single human being who is walking will carry at least one Chinese product in his body. That is the nature of the Chinese rice that I'm talking about. It's never this, somebody who could have the courage and the confidence that every human being who is walking will carry at least one item of China. That's the rice of China that we are talking about. The third is the rice of China cannot be seen only in terms of only China. There is a rice of Asia. Never before the Asian, that is why we have been talking about the Asian century. Yeah, that we thought India, China, Japan, and South Korea will be the pillars of the global politics. I don't know whether we have followed closely the Obama period's foreign policy on pivot, the American pivot or the American rebalancing, later Trump's idea of Indo-Pacific. You look at all these strategies, pivot, rebalancing, Indo-Pacific. They all talk about Asia. If I may say so, I'm convinced for the first time in the 2010s, in the last 100 years, the shift from European theater, it has come to the Asian theater. Everyone was wanting to come to Asia. It's a different story that in India, we want to see India as the center. In China, people may want to see China as the center. But the reality is Asia was becoming the center of global politics. This has never happened before, the way it was happening in the fourth rise was the rise of maritime Asia. So it's just not the mainland. It's also the maritime part. Indian Ocean, South China Sea, Pacific. That's why people started talking in terms of the Indo-Pacific. So there was just not the rise of Asia. There was also the rise of maritime Asia. Yeah. So in which that's why every navy wants to have a engagement with the Indian Navy, because Indian Navy by far is the biggest navy in the Indian Ocean. That's why China came up with this maritime Silk Route, because it wanted to have a strong presence in the maritime. So the rise of Asia is not only restricted to the mainland, it also involves the maritime. When we talk about maritime Asia, automatically Singapore comes in, Indonesia comes in, entire Southeast Asia comes in, East Asia comes in. So when I'm talking about the rise of Asia, it is just not the rise of China and India alone. It is the rise of Asia as a continent together. I was convinced, 1 year before, if you'd have asked me to give this lecture, I would have talked about this is the era of Asia. I would have had enough statistics to prove and tell the world has shifted from European history to Asian history. What I studied as world history in my college days was basically European history, as if it's France, Germany, Prussia, Russia, and UK managed the world. Maybe it was true, but then today, or let me put it this way: if somebody is going to write the history of 2010s, 50 years after, I'm sure they'll be talking about the Asian century. That is what there was a rise of Asia, the fourth point that I have. But then this rise of Asia, I was talking to you about China, the Asia, maritime Asia. There were also rise of protest movements, the negative side, whether in Middle East or in Central Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, from Syria to Myanmar. You see, there were a series of protest movements for various reasons. We grouped it as under Arab Spring, somewhere else. We grouped it separately, but then there was a series of protest movements when COVID was taking place. And please keep this in mind. These protest movements were varied. Some were gender movements, some were movements asking for climate change, some were wanting to protect the environment. Yeah. So there were global protest movements. That's why Time called this girl, Greta, as the as the person of the year. You know, so there were protests from east to west, north to south, on multiple areas, from climate change to economic issues to various issues. There were countries were witnessing protest movements. That's my fifth point. How I saw the last decade. Then the next rise that I could say in 2020 was the rise of technology. You know, technology has been growing ever since the human civilization was formed. But the rapid rise in which technology was transforming the world as it did in 2010 was amazing. You know, how, sitting in Africa, one could access, or I'm sitting on the outskirts of Madurai, I'm talking to you, lecturing to you in Bangalore and rest of the India. That shows the rise of technology in multiple areas. You know, somebody could sit in Chicago and do a operation in Delhi. To use the technology. Now the cars, the automobile industry is talking about, or was talking about, unmanned cars. This is, if you remember some of the movies, I can list them, some 8 or 10 movies that we may have watched in the 1980s and the 1990s as science fictions. Today, they are no more science fictions. Many movies that we watch in the 80s and 90s look like, it doesn't look like a science fiction for me. It looks like it's happening today, or it was happening. So that was the change that was taking place in the last decade, the rise of technology. The last point I was talking about, 6 or 7 rise in the last decade. But the most important thing, if you ask me, is the retreat of the US. I would not call it as the decline of the US. The US retreated from many, I can talk for an hour on explaining how the US retreated. To say a few words, for example, from climate change treaty, it walked out. From TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, it walked out. It doesn't want to be a part of the START treaties with Russia. There are many things. US is retreating. Now, is it because US is declining, or US wants to prevent the decline? Is the retreat development or a strategy to prevent further decline? This is something that we have to question ourselves and find out whether the retreat is fact or a strategy. I think the retreat is more of a strategy of the US to prevent any further decline and to let China emerge. Yeah. So this is what I see when COVID took place in 2020. Yeah. Now let's look at the post-COVID world. That's my third section. I am convinced, that's my third hypothesis for you for the day. I'm convinced that the COVID is not going to completely change everything that has happened in 2010s. While it's likely to disrupt certain developments, it's also likely to deepen some of the developments that have happened, which means, in some places it's going to be a disruptor, and some places it's going to be an enabler. I'll come back and tell you in where I see it as an enabler and where I see it as a disruptor. Yeah. The biggest disruption of COVID would be to globalization. I think the globalization, as we saw, in terms of movement of labor, movement of goods, movement of ideas, especially the first two, I think is under grave danger. What do I mean by that? Yeah, if you are in Dubai airport or Doha airport, yeah, please look at the signboard where which flights going where. At any given time, there would be at least 15 to 18 flights to different destinations in India, from Chandigarh to Delhi, Mumbai, Lucknow, Trivandrum, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Chennai. There are a number of. Is that because the people from Middle East wanting to come to India for tourism? No, it is our people who are working in the Middle East. Yeah. And same is the case with the Nepalis, same is the case with the Bangladeshis, same is the case with Pakistanis. There are a number of South Asians working in the Middle East. movement of labor. Labor went from here to there. Mexicans, they will go and work in the US. Yeah. Romanians, East Europeans will come and work in France, Germany, and then go back. So the movement of labor was one of the primary aspects of globalization. Movement of ideas, movement of technology. What is the great fight about between US and China? Huawei. US doesn't want China to be the technology power, so it's trying to control that. So the point here is, in terms of globalization, COVID is going to be a great disruptor. COVID is also going to be a disruptor in terms of the global order that we were witnessing. The retreat of US, the rise or the slow rise of European Union, and the rise of China. Now this I don't know. That's my honest answer. Whether COVID would impact on the rise of China as we saw in the 2010s. China was able to invest all over the world. In Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, they were able to invest all over the world. They were able to be present in all these places. Yeah, the number of direct flights between China and African countries, South Asian countries, and Southeast Asian countries remarkably changed in the last 10 years. That was how China was integrated with rest of the world, and rest of the world was getting integrated with China in terms of they becoming the supply chains. Whether it was Vietnam in Southeast Asia or the Volvo in Sweden or the Benz cars in Germany, they became the supply chains to China. Now, whether this would get affected, I don't know. We have to wait and see. As I told you, we don't know whether we have finished the COVID phase yet. So we have to wait and see. But then there are enough hints that the rise of China may get slowed down. Yeah. Now, I was telling you, in some places it's going to be a disruptor, some places it's going to deepen. One of the places I believe it's going to deepen is in terms of the protest movement that I was talking about. During the COVID time, the states used COVID as an excuse to prevent people from coming together. I think that period is over. That 2 months period is over. Now you see the protest movement coming back with a greater intensity. Yeah, and my fear is it is going to continue. It is going to deepen. See what's happening in the US. Shooting of a police, shooting of a African American by a policeman, and the American police would give you multiple statistics. On an average, 2,000 people get killed in every year. So why did this one shooting really change? Yeah, or the alternative question that you may want to ask is, what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota? Why did it affect Atlanta or San Francisco or Washington DC or Texas? Why did a shooting in Minnesota expanded to other parts of the US? A larger question that you may want to ask is, why did something happen in US echoed in Berlin, London, and Paris? Yeah, my point here is, all the countries have local problems. There are issues, and then we used the protest movements, used something that's happening elsewhere, and they used as a common theme to bring together. For example, before the COVID, what happened in Hong Kong influenced what is happening in Spain. If you followed the Spanish news in the last 1 year, you would know what happened in Hong Kong affecting what is happening. It's a different story. Technology, globalization, whatever it is. So one movement affecting the other movement. What is happening in Sudan would obviously affect the other countries in Africa. Yeah. So the protest movements, my fear is going to deepen. So there are going to be disruptors, and then there's going to be the 2020s also will change. I was talking to you about the rise of science and technology. What the COVID would underline is the limitations of science and technology. all countries, we are all working together to find a cure for the last 3 months or more than 3 months. That shows, despite I was telling you about how technology last decade was really a you know, transformative part, but you see that how science and technology is not able to address a virus. These are the how I see the limitations of the next decade. The last point on how the next decade will look like would depend on the retreat of the US, whether it would retreat any further, or whether European Union will fill that retreat. Under Angela Merkel and Macron, there seems to be a moment in terms of pushing European Union to the fore as an actor in global politics. Whether EU has the ideology, funds, and the political will to take the place of retreating US and be the new new actor in the global politics, or whether China will be able to meet the challenges of the COVID and then emerge as the single most superpower. My answer is I don't know. So we have to wait for a couple of years too. So this is the world order, how it looks like for the 2020s. Now I'll come to the last section. What are the challenges for India? I was talking to you and I was having a hypothesis for all the three sections. For the fourth section, in terms of India's challenges and options, my hypothesis is India does not have many options, unfortunately. Our options are limited. Yeah. Now, what could be the options for India, keeping in mind what is happening in this world? One, India can adjust to whatever is happening at the global order. Yeah. So India changes itself to the changing world order in the 2020s. That is one option. I'm sure you will all agree. India can change itself and then get along with the global order. Yeah. The second thing is India can be ambitious and then try to change the world order. That's what the Chinese are trying to do now. They're not trying to change according to the world order. They're trying to change the world order. They want to have a China-led world order. Whether India can change the world order. That's the second option for India. One, go along with the changes. The second one is change the order. The third one, I don't care. Like I'm Zimbabwe or I'm Sri Lanka or I'm Nepal or I'm Bhutan. Whatever happens, Rajinikanth will take care of, kind of an attitude. In terms of, if you ask me the three options, either India adjusts to the change, or India changes, or India kind of remain indifferent to the world order. I don't think the second and third are options for India now. India certainly cannot remain indifferent to the world order. India is too big a country to ignore and say indifferent to the world order. Having said that, now is India big enough to change the world order? Again, India is big enough, but not sufficiently big enough to change the world order. So India's option is India has to play with the other actors. Yeah. So I'll start with this hypothesis and then look at what are the options for India. Okay. The first major challenge for India would be China. Yeah. What to do with China? Let's face the facts. After COVID, China is trying to assert and be aggressive, not only vis-a-vis India. As a foreign policy projection, China is trying to be aggressive. 2-3 examples. The first example is look at China-Australia relations in the last few weeks. Yeah, Australia said that the WHO, the World Health Organization, should have an independent inquiry into how COVID broke out. Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent demand by a country. Let's look into where did this come from. China was extremely unhappy. The Chinese ambassador in public said, please keep in mind the trade relationship between Australia and China, meaning don't toe this line. Don't try to fix China as the center of COVID in the global, in WHO. Keep away from it. Australia continued with that pace. Then the ambassador came again and said, they made a they made a note that the Chinese, it said that it asked the Chinese students not to get back to Australia. It's again a threat. And then it came up with a note on the barley. Trying to impact the trade relations. You have to understand the Australian education system. I'm sure many of you, after your graduation, would want to go and study in Australia. Australian education system is one of the best in the world today. If you ask me, and in fact, it's as good as the European and the American system today. It is one of the best. But unfortunately for the Australians, the Chinese and the South Asians make this education system in Australia run than Australian themselves. If the Chinese, South Asians and the Southeast Asians leave Australia, students leave Australia, the educational institutions will collapse. Yeah, and that is what China is hinting at. If you do this, this is what we will do. Yeah, and look at what China did in Hong Kong. Last 1 year, there have been protests. Yeah, and then suddenly they came up with a legislation, taking over Hong Kong. So both inside China and outside China, you see an assertive China. Yeah. So what you see between India and China is a part of this rising China, which is assertive, not only with India, but also, this is one. Number two, the US. Yeah. I'm hoping that you are following what is happening between North Korea and South Korea in the last few months. South Korea is an ally and a partner of the US. North Korea, Trump and Kim was trying to have a moment. And then, last week they finished 2 years of their Singapore summit, but nothing happened. A few days before, North Korea bombed the liaison office between North Korea and South Korea. North Korea is telling South Korea, don't be close with US. Yeah. Taiwan has substantial issues with China. Suppose if there is a serious problem either in Taiwan or in South China or in South Korea, will US come to help? If you are a policy maker in Washington, D.C., what would be your advice to Trump? If I am the policy advisor to Trump, I would say South Korea is too far. Let's not take on North Korea now. Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. That's what US would do. So, that's the second point that India has to face. US is on a retreat mode. It is unlikely to come and, stick its neck out and then support you. So India has to look into this. The third thing is the most important one. The rise of European Union. Yeah, India has a strategic partnership with EU. Yeah, so India will have to strengthen its relationship with EU and then take it forward. But will EU come to our rescue or come and support our position in global politics? Suppose if the conflict along the border between India and China, which we saw, it would have gone worse. Which side would have EU stood? Yeah. So there is a rise of European Union, but can India take it for granted that the EU will stand by India or EU will support India in the long run? So this is a calculation that we have to do. The fourth point in terms of India's option. China can do all these things. This is very important. I want all of us to understand. China can do all these things because China is an economic power. You have to accept it. If you have to draw a graph, look at the US strategic partners. Who are the largest US strategic partner? let's say Australia, let's say UK, let's say Germany, let's say France. Okay. Now, who are the major trading partner of US strategic partners? It's not US, it's China. Yeah. So, China is the largest trading partner of most of the American strategic partners. China is the largest partner of US itself. Yeah. So China has an economic clout with many countries. It's just not economic clout. It is the technological clout that we don't understand. Many people who talk about China that it's not happening. We should go to China and see what China is. Sitting in India, we have an image about China. China is a technological power today. The number of PhDs on science and technology, number of patents from Chinese scholars, the number of peer-reviewed essays published in the top-notch journals by the Chinese, writing in Chinese. There is no comparison between what was there 20 years before what is there today. The rise of China is a comprehensive rise that we have to understand. The last point on the rise of China is, we talk about, we have a youth bulge. We have the demographic dividend, that what we call. Let's compare it with other countries. How quality is our youth? Yeah. How deep is our economic power in terms of if we have to work with African countries or Southeast Asian countries and others. We don't have deep pockets as the Chinese have today. We may be there soon, maybe 5 years down the lane, 10 years down the lane, 15 years down the lane. But as of today, we don't have our deep pockets. We have a pocket, but it's not deep enough as the Chinese have. Yeah. So the last point is our neighborhood. For India, the biggest challenge is how to manage our neighborhood. It's a different lecture altogether. You see what's happening between India and Nepal. Yeah. Despite having such a close relationship between India and Nepal, why is that India and Nepal relations is in such a mess today? Yeah. There is a neighbor, there is a South Asia problem for India, and which we have to manage. That's one big challenge. I'll stop here in terms of the last section. Maybe we can look into what are the other challenges in India, whether India has the capacity to take it forward, whether we have the strategies to take it forward. But I'll stop here with a quick underline. Number one, the world is changing, and most of the change is not by design, by disruption. Yeah, and the world was changing in the last decade. COVID is likely to disrupt some of the changes that took place in the last decade and deepen some of the changes that took place in the last decade. And third, India's options are limited. And then there are serious challenges. I'm not telling that India would not meet them, but we have serious challenges. We have to, as people would say, we have to keep our house in order. Yeah. With that note, I'll rest my case. Ramya.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. You were very clear. You had presented your thought in a very elegant manner. And you have said that about how the world is definitely changing, not just because of COVID-19, but COVID-19 has caused disruptions to the pattern of change. So the global order will be continuing to change, but we cannot predict it immediately which direction it would go. So there are many raised hands I can see now. There are a lot of people who would like to ask questions. So if you have question, you can either type in the chat box, or you may raise hands and I shall unmute you so that you can ask the question directly. Let me go with Professor Vishwanath Acharya, who has raised his hand. Sir, I'm unmuting you. Professor Vishwanath. Vishwanath, are you here? Yes, Vishwanath sir or Rajkumar sir, Professor Rajkumar, are you able to hear me? No.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir, good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
Sir, good afternoon. I am Dr. Rajkumar from Madurai Yadava College.
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Sir, where did that Chinese invasion started toward that economic or these type of financial or these type of commercial oriented things? Second one, instead of saying as a globalization, shall we say that the pseudo urbanization have leads to this this major havoc what we are facing now, maybe labor migration or that globalization or anything else?
Ramya, you want to answer one by one, or I take more questions? How do
one by one is fine, sir. We can go that way. I will allow others. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Rajkumar, thanks for that note.
Yes, sir.
The first question on China's technology. Quickly, I think we have to understand the Chinese mind. I'm sure every country, every nation, every people have a mind. Like people would say, this is how Indians respond. This is how Pakistanis respond. This is how Bangladeshis respond. I think there is a Chinese mind. This we should understand. That looks big and that looks in long term. If you have visited the Great Wall of China, and then see how the Great Wall of China was built, I'm sure the guy who would have thought about it would have never lived to see that. Yeah. And the guys who built consequently would have never agreed with the guy who really conceived it. But then they went along with the plan. They think massive, they invest for long term, and then they plan it for generations. It's not 10 years, 15 years. It's, if you ask me, I think they plan for an entire civilization. Yeah. So this, if you ask me, this technology, I think it should have started somewhere in the 70s and the 80s. The fruits of what you see would have started. And then Chinese wait for things to develop. So it didn't happen in a single, in 5 years, 10 years term. Second point on urbanization, whether the movement is because of the ill effects of urbanization. My point is, movement is reality. Civilization across the globe progress because of movement. Yeah. If otherwise we would have never had a civilization. We would have just been in one place. So movement is a reality. Yeah. And movement, in most cases, when people moved from one place to other, there was a very strong economic component to it. Why did someone in the Nile Valley move to certain areas, or from I'm sure the historians, you are all historians, you would know. Euphrates, Tigris, how did we move, and for what reason did we move? Movement, labor movement is part of the civilization. That's how we move. So movement is, whether there is going to be urbanization or not, movement would be there, irrespective of urbanization. And then again, as I said, movement is there. Urbanization has also been the case ever since the first city was built, maybe along the rivers of the Euphrates, Tigris, in maybe the Sumer. Yeah. So I would not call it as urbanization. Urbanization didn't start in one single day. In fact, if you ask me, it has been going. Globalization, as I was trying to explain in the last 10 years, was different from what was happening earlier. the level of information, the level of who wants what. Yeah. Somebody sitting in Kathmandu, you should, in Kathmandu, you should see early in the morning around 6:37, the airline offices open. So people will be standing in a queue, and then they will be asking the guy who is giving the earn better for them. So the technology has also shaped and helped movement of labor. Today, sitting in Bangladesh, I know where I can go to make money, and more importantly, how I can go. Last month, around 26 Bangladeshis were killed in Libya. Yeah, and Bangladeshis were using Libya as a transit point to go to Europe. Yeah, this is the level of information that we have. So globalization is an independent phenomenon. I would rather go with that. I take the point, but let's not exaggerate the ill effects of urbanization.
Thank you, sir. I have another question. Professor Rajkumar, would you like to ask the question now?
Ma'am?
Yes, sir. Rajkumar?
Sir, thanks for your clarification, sir. But what I want to need to ask one more question means, nowadays for this COVID-19, all the things that mean the migrated laborers have retracted to their own places. It may be from other countries or other states. Uh, uh, Whether we will say that this will be a real globalization or urbanization or towards the upliftment of that migrated laborers or anything else, because if we are
Yes,
having
sir.
that
Thank you.
sustainable
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got the point. See, there is a change in the quality of labor that the recipient country demands. Yeah, US wants labor, but a qualified labor. It doesn't want people who don't have any basic skills. So what US want is a skilled labor today. That same is the case in Europe as well. So movement of labor doesn't take place unless that labor is skilled. Yeah. So my fear is, when the COVID is not going to define the movement of labor forever. you know you have to go back and build that football stadium in Doha. You have to go back and work in Middle East. But that when that happens, I think they are going to look at more qualified skilled laborers than unskilled laborers or semi-skilled laborers. So my fear is, for a country like India or Nepal or Bangladesh, this less skilled and the semi-skilled will go abroad, and we will end up with having labor but not skilled. So
Yes,
I'm sure you would face it in your own town. You will have some of the best plumbers going and working from Afghanistan to Middle East, and then you would get someone who will spoil your taps and pipes at home. Yeah.
thank you, sir. I would like to call upon Mr. Ron Baby, Dr. Ron Baby George.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Can you introduce yourself and please ask the question? A short question, please.
Actually, my name is Baby George. I am pursuing my third year BA History in MCC College, sir.
Okay. Hearty welcome.
I need to know that. Thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, my question is regarding. We had read in the newspapers that by 2040, China will become one of the best. Financially, they will overcome the American nation by 2040. If we look upon the phone apps that we are using nowadays, they said that we need to ban almost all those things, confrontation that is happening within the frontiers. But India is in which ways does it self-sufficient to overcome these situations that the restraints that have been put by China as a major country?
Thank you.
Okay. Uh, George, quickly responds to your question. See, the rise of China is inevitable. The economic rise is inevitable, and 2040, maybe because of the COVID, that 2040 figures may move a bit 5 years down the lane, 10 years down the lane, uh, to be the largest economy in the world. Yeah, but please keep in mind, it doesn't mean the other economies remain stagnant. The other economies will also be moving, but not at the grandeur scale of the Chinese. Yeah, I'm sure Indian economy will also be growing, and European economy will also be. So is the case with technology. Yeah, uh, as I was responding to an earlier question, the Chinese invested in technology much earlier than us. Yeah. Now the last year I was telling, I spent my time in Beijing. All the telephone offices, they are talking about 5G. They're already into the 5G. We are still in 4G and 3G. So they advanced. They invested earlier in technology. It doesn't mean that we will not have 5G in the next 5 years. Only thing is that there will be a gap between us and them. Yeah, and you will have to accept that as world comes closer, the Chinese applications will be a reality. Yeah. uh,
Yes, sir.
for a moment, just 1 minute. For a moment, think yourself you are a Sri Lankan sitting in Colombo. Yeah, you will see all the buses are Ashok Leyland buses made in India. All the autos are Bajaj autos made in India. Yeah. So what, as a Sri Lankan, will you complain that all of them are Indian? You have to accept. It's a Indian economy is a bigger economy when compared to Sri Lanka. And Chinese economy is a bigger economy when compared to India. That you have to accept.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. M.S. Fatima Begum has a question. Go ahead, ma'am. You can unmute yourself. I have given the. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Dr. M.S. Fatima Begum, Assistant Professor, working at Dindakal GTN Arts College, Tamil Nadu, sir. My question is, China and India both have unique arms length, Why don't both have been able to identify and cooperate on wider global issues, sir? That is my question, sir.
It's interesting. I'm sure, if you're a Chinese, you could have asked the same question. Why is the Chinese and the Americans are not cooperating? Yeah. I understand the question. It's a serious question. India and China are likely to compete with each other as both are growing. Yeah. The same way the Chinese and the Americans are competing. If you look at the global history, I'm sure, Ramya and her colleagues will be able to tell us. That's the way global history has been. Two countries have always been competing for power and influence. That's the way global history has been. Right from the days of the Roman history. You could have asked the same question. Why didn't France and Germany didn't cooperate, or why did Germany and Russia didn't cooperate? Yeah, this is the way that global civilization, global history has moved, because two competing countries want to have influence over the region, in this case over the larger world. So both countries will compete. But please keep this in mind. At the height of the difference between US and China, even today, US-China trade relations is enormous. What is the trade relation between India and China? It's a $1 trillion trade that we are having between India and China. We will cooperate on trade, and we will compete on power relations, and then we will fight in the border. We will do it across all three. Yeah, because both are looking for global supremacy or global influence.
Mr. Ajay Sharma, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Ajay Sharma. I am from Chitkara University, student of MBA final year. My question is regarding the raw material requirement. Like India is dependent on raw material on various countries, especially on China. And moreover, my question is specific to mobile market in India. Like Chinese mobile market is already occupied a huge numbers in India. So how after this COVID-19 crisis will over? So is there any major boom in the mobile market by Indian manufacturers, or still the China is going to rule game like similar China is did?
Thank you.
Thank you. So quickly, please keep this in mind. We think when we go to any mall that there are Chinese goods are dominating. Yeah, in Beijing there are many malls. When my friends take me to the mall, and then they'll say anywhere you go there is Vietnamese goods. In China that's what they like how we talk about the Chinese goods. Chinese talk about the Japanese goods and the Vietnamese goods. Especially Vietnamese goods. So there is a perception, and then the Chinese would say the Vietnamese goods are very cheap. The same language that we use for the Chinese goods. Chinese goods are cheap, and that's the reality. Where the goods are cheaper, where it's sold, economically viable, then you buy them. Yeah. On the mobile market in particular, I think China has taken the lead and be the leader. I think you have to accept it. Yeah. For example, in automobile industry, you are willing to accept the Germans and the Americans and the Japanese as the world leader. And the Chinese have accepted, by the way. Chinese are not producing any cars. Chinese have accepted that Germans and the Japanese are better car makers. So, on other issues, we also have to accept that the Chinese mobile markets, and then some of the others also will be better than the rest of the world.
Yes, sir. So the next question is in the chat box. Professor Shrestha wants to know, is this a right opportunity for India to bargain for United Nations Security Council permanent seat rather than becoming a temporary member?
No, I'm sure you would have been following that. There is already a membership to India as a non-permanent.
Akshita.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I may sound a bit idealist on this. Recognition is something that you have to receive, not ask for it.
Okay.
Yeah. If you go and campaign, I need UN Security Council seat, I need UN Security Council seat, you will keep, looking for it. Yeah, that's one. And second, honestly speaking, ask yourself on what basis you think we have done enough to gain that seat. Yeah, what is that we have brought to the table? Okay, this is what India is. I mean, we cannot say we are 1 billion people. When did we start looking at measuring power in terms of number of people? What do you bring? What does India bring? India would put this much in the table. For upliftment of Africa, we will take care of 5 countries or 6 countries. Our support will be 30% of their budget, something like that. So what is that we bring to the table that would demand that seat? We will be there one day, but I don't think we are there yet. Just because we say we are biggest democracies, and just go and find out in parts of Bihar, UP, and your own panchayat election, and then see how big a democracy you are and how much you pay for your votes. Yeah. So let's look inwards and ask ourselves, are we there yet? My honest answer is we are not there yet.
Okay, sir. Mr. Balasubramanian Shivakumar has a question. I have unmuted you, sir.
Yeah. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Sir, actually, I have 2 questions. Now, the thing is, India is surrounded by people who are not friendly with India in the current scenario. Say Pakistan, say China. I mean, even Nepal is not friendly with India at the moment. So, who would India look up to in case a conflict erupts? Who would India look up to for an alliance? And what kind of an arms policy should India follow in the future?
Okay.
A very interesting question. There is a very important in terms of neighbors, but before I answer that question, I want you to ask this question yourself. Okay, which big country in the world has friendly neighbors in the past? Yeah, China has a problem in Mongolia, with Japan, with In Taiwan, with Vietnam, with India, the list goes. US still has a problem with Mexico and Canada. There are still a lot of problems between US, Mexico, US, and Canada. Germany, when it was rising, Germany had a problem with all its neighbors. In the First World War would not have happened had it been they had been a finish. So, on a positive note, if you ask me, the sign of a rising power is unfriendly neighbors. Yeah. No, on a serious note, big countries are bound to have problems with the neighbors. Neighbors are, to an extent, liability. At the same time, neighbors are also an asset, because you are intertwined so closely, historically, culturally, and in every sense. What happens in one place affects the other. Forget about India's problem with neighborhood. I teach in Karnataka. Yeah. How good is Karnataka's relationship with Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh? These are our neighbors. No, we are all Indians. How good is, you think, our relationship between the? So there are bound to be, what my teacher used to call it as the pangs of proximity. Because you are in the proximity, there are going to be some pangs. It's not that you cannot address them. You have to accept that there will be an element of problems in your neighborhood. The real challenge is how to address, I'm sure you are talking in terms of what's happening between India and Nepal today. Ask ourselves, could we have avoided this India and Nepal problem?
Yeah.
We could have. Nepal was asking for the last 15 years to have a dialogue with them on Kalapani. India could have had a dialogue with Nepal. We did. On the other side, you also have to ask, is whatever Prime Minister Oli is doing in Kathmandu, is he doing because there is a problem with India, or because he sees it as a political opportunity? Yeah. In India's neighborhood, it is unfortunate that your nationalism is built on an anti-Indian sentiment. Yeah. You go to Bangladesh, are you a Bangladeshi? No, I don't like Indians. Go to Sri Lanka, are you in Sri Lanka? No, I don't like Indians. So, your nationalist sentiment is being narrated by your anti-Indian. Yeah. So political leadership would play to that sentiment. The last point on armaments, historically, there is no country that felt secure with bigger and better arms. If that is the case, Israel should have been the most secure country today. Israel has enough arms. So is US. I don't think any other country in the world has as many arms. Let's take the question of nuclear weapons. They say nuclear weapons, US has nuclear weapons enough to destroy the world 6 times. So why would you want to destroy the second time if you have destroyed the first time? Why do you need that many weapons? But then US has built that many weapons. But is US safe? Look at what's happening in the US. I'm sure Lalu Prasad Yadav in Bihar would be laughing at Trump. What kind of a US you have? I had better Bihar. Yeah? So, arms doesn't make you secure. It doesn't make any country secure. Ask Ramya and ask her to tell you historically whether that is true. I don't know whether I answered your question.
Yes, sir. You did, sir. You did, I think. I have another 3 or 5 people raising hands. I don't know. I'm just speaking. There's a student, I think, Akshita Maheshwari. If you are a student, kindly introduce yourself. Yes,
Thank you,
Akshita.
ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. So, I am from Sophia Girls College, Ajmer, and I am pursuing my master's in modern Indian history. So, I have one question. I would like to talk about Gandhi. He always talked about Swadeshi and Sarvodaya, and he always wanted that an individual should always remain in his or her own surrounding to work or to go some industry or what. So, do you think, sir, that the values of Gandhi is reviving in the era of COVID-19? Thank you, sir.
Interesting question. You know, Akshita, the question whether Gandhi's ideas are reviving, it implies as if there was a time that Gandhi's ideas were declining. Let us not start with the perception. In principle, nobody in the right's mind would say Gandhi's values are not practical or not value. So we always believe in Gandhian ideals, at least as Indians, I'm sure we would believe in those ideas. But it's only the question of practicing it. All of us, whether you are in China or in US or in Japan, you may preach something and then you may practice something depending on what suits you. And we are all, there is an element of hypocrisy in terms of how we practice, especially some of the great values and the great people that you have produced in the past. Yeah. But I'm not convinced that there was a time we forgot Gandhi, that we have to revive him. A section always believes in him and then follow what he said, and then a section doesn't. Even the fact that Gandhi was assassinated shows that Gandhi was not believed by a section at that time. So you have to accept that there are both sections.
True. Sir, I have another question from Mr. Nidil. There is a question. Was our stand, India being having a stand of neutrality, was that a problem for India to progress faster? Should India change that stand of neutrality now or be more aggressive?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. You have to ask yourself. We followed non-alignment or neutrality because we believed in it, or did we follow non-alignment or neutrality in many cases because it suited us at the time as a strategy? My question to us, all of us, ask this question yourself. Was that non-alignment, neutrality an objective, or was that a strategy? If it is an objective, then you have to follow. If that is my end goal, so I would follow. If that is a strategy, perhaps it helped us achieve in a particular era. Nehru talked about non-alignment because he didn't want to be a part of both the blocks, but at the same time he wanted to get help from both blocks. So non-alignment, he used as a strategy. So when the world is not aligned, you cannot talk about non-alignment. No, if the world is non-aligned or unaligned.
Miss Madhura has a question. Madhura, would you like to ask the question?
Good morning. Good
Yes.
afternoon. Yeah. So good afternoon, sir. My name is I'm from St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. I'm doing my second year of undergraduation.
Okay.
So I have two questions. My first question is, you talked about the growing of technology, globalized world, right?
Yes.
So when you talk about technology, you also talk about the threats that come through technology, through internet or cyber security as such. So is that cyber threat something that has global harmony? How there are people using Russia? How does that come to play when you talk about international relations?
Madhura, I didn't get the second part, but I'll respond to your first question on the rise of technology. Yeah, right from day one, when we started inventing, whether our stone tool or whatever it is, all invention came with a threat. It depended on how we used it. Yeah,
necessity.
Any invention that I would even there are cases in which babies choke to death because of the feeding bottle nipple. So what should we do? We should not have a feeding bottle and a nipple. No, all inventions come with a issue. So technology is that's what people say. Technology is a double-edged sword that you can use it. So that's what people say. It's not the guns that kill people; it's the people who kill people. So the technology is a strategy and an instrument. You can do both ways. Yeah. And then please also keep this in mind. There has been opposition to technology since the old days. I'm sure if you are talking about the history of the railways, you might have heard about how people came up with multiple theories, in principle, why there should be no railways. If only if the world believed in that time, I'm sure you would not be going from place one to place two today. Yeah. And then there are a lot of people who made the same argument. Railways is not good for health. Cows go and get killed. If you're staying close to the railway track, you go deaf, you go dumb. All those stories. Yeah. Technology.
Oh, they had. Yes, sir. There are even travelers' account which says our body parts will spill out of the body if we travel in a train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get the point. There is technology
Yes.
has its own dangers, but we cannot see that technology is something that you just can't stop it.
Yes.
The onward march of technology, nobody can stop it. Nobody has stopped it, and I'm pretty convinced nobody can stop it. That's technology has a mind of its own. It doesn't listen to anyone.
Sure. Yes, sir. Two more questions. There are 7 raised hands, but we will allow another 2 questions, sir, as another appointment to go to. Another couple of questions, sir, with your permission. Pooja Patil. Student. Pooja Patil is here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please. You can ask your question.
Hello, sir. So my question is that China has repeatedly made a mistake of hiding their pandemic situation, and it has not warned the world regarding it. Although it has done so, it has not really faced any major consequence or punishment for the mistake it has done. Why is that so? And also, other than banning Chinese goods, is there any way how the world can teach China a lesson so that this mistake is not repeated again?
Okay, thank you. Sir, can I take another 2 questions also, and together sir can answer? Aresh, Mr. Aresh is here. Aresh wants to ask a question. Yes.
Thank you, madam. Hello, sir.
Yes, please ask your question.
Sir, I just wanted to, know that, don't you think that, the capital, market liberal policies, as the, main reason, for this, present crisis, because the capitalist, economies are the capitalist states, mostly oriented toward profits, and they are not investing on the, public sector or public health. So, I mean, the delay in the finding, vaccine or, etc.
Thank you. Sir, one more. Sashi Kumar, would you like to ask a question? Sir will pick and answer whatever sir would like to answer now. Sashi Kumar BS has a question, but yes, please. Sashi Kumar, I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'm talking to student or a professor. I'm just calling your name as you have written. Sashi Kumar sir is here. No. Yes, sir. Please kindly answer. Thank you, Subhash sir.
Okay. Quickly on the first question on whether China has repeatedly made mistakes on.
Okay.
Yeah. China did not reveal the data or the extent of the data to the public. Yeah. But please keep in mind, this is the trait of all big powers.
Yeah.
They hide data, they manipulate data, and then and then they have been getting away with all this. So China is not the only country to hide data or manipulate data and get away with that. For example, Brazil is doing it as we are speaking. Brazil is doing it. Now the second question that you have asked is very important. Can rest of the world punish China? Yeah. That's precisely what Australia had in mind, not in terms of punishing, to hold accountable. How did this happen? And and how it could have tackled. That's precisely China smartly. What it did was, instead of looking at uh, how the problem originated, it changed the dialogue in the WHO, World Health Organization, and it kind of watered the idea of the investigation. It changed. The WHO will now look into lessons learned out of COVID. So you're not going to look at where the problem was and whether the problem could have been addressed better if China would have told earlier. Yeah. But the most important point is, in terms of punishing, I don't think any country has that kind of a economic standing or a political standing to stand up and say, we shall do that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sure.
That's a harsh reality of it. I just give an example. Much before COVID happened, China said, if you consider Taiwan as a separate country in your booking list, it said American Airlines will not, any of the American Airlines, not the American Airlines, Delta, all those others will not fly. And all those, the great American, ideologies, that we believe in democracy, all those drama, they all said, they all went along with what China said. So here, it's unfortunate. The economic might, the political clout that China has decides what it is. And then, trust me, it's not just China. All big powers get away with that, with data, manipulating data, and hiding data. This has been the case. Yeah? The second story on capitalism, it's not a convincing argument. If that is the case, then socialist countries would have produced a vaccine better. Or socialist countries would have had a bigger and better health infrastructure.
Sure.
So let
Yes,
us
sir.
not try to shift the blame on capitalism. I mean, it's ideologically, it's very exciting to do that. To blame capitalism, but factually that may not be correct. That's my.
Thank you, sir. You have been very direct, and you are able to answer majority of the question which I am presenting to you, because in the chat box another 20 plus questions are there. There's one note which probably gels with what you are also saying. Ms. Soumya Deep Mitra is asking, is India's position in world politics at present is not very good. Is India responsible for the deterioration of the relationship? And how much India can trust America as the political friend at the moment? And is India itself responsible for deterioration of Indo-Nepal relations? Another person is asking, Pranay. Then is it a new Cold War going to replace now? Is there going to be a new type of Cold War going to happen? Another teacher is asking us. Is it going to happen with China as the main superpower along with the rest of the world, or there's going to be groups? And I also have a lot of students who are enthusiastically wanting to ask questions.
Run the questions, I'll see how much of it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Then what role can India play in mobilizing global cooperation in multilateral institutions? If, for example, BRICS, can India take a leadership in bringing better collaboration instead of more conflicts? So these are some questions, and Mr. Nikhil also wants to ask a question. Then Dr. Purushottam has asked, do you have any suggestions to how India can use this as an opportunity to strengthen economy? So we have many ways to discuss, sir. So time is yours. So whatever you'd like to answer, please do so, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Quickly, I have 5 or 6 questions. I'll run them really fast on India and Nepal relations.
Yes,
as I was trying to tell you, there was Nepalese for the last 20-25 years have been asking India, that let us settle Kalapani. Yeah, and then we were dodging it. Okay.
Yes.
And so there is an issue in the way that we conduct international relations. Sometimes many of our neighbors believe that India is very hard, it comes heavy-handed when it comes to dealing with the neighbors. There's an element of truth in it, but the equally important is there is a political problem within the neighborhood. Using India as a cause for all the problems, kind of it addresses their politics. For example, the Maoists or the communists and the Nepali Congress, the two parties which are now doing their rounds. What I would oppose when I'm in the opposition, I will do the same thing when I'm in the ruling. Yeah. So this is how the politics, Nepal's politics, Bangladesh politics, Sri Lankan politics has been. Opposing India is seen as favoring your own political stance and getting more votes. So this is one answer. The last question that Purushottam asked, how India can address this. See, the problem is not how Oli is responding. The Prime Minister of Nepal is responding. The Prime Minister of Nepal is doing because he believes doing so will get him votes, which means being an anti-Indian will get a political party some votes in our neighborhood. So let's address why is that being anti-Indian get them votes, which means there is some issue among the people that makes them vote for somebody that's being anti-Indian. So this is what we have to look into, whether COVID or not COVID, in terms of how to respond to our neighborhood. We have to build better relationship with our neighbors. That's number one. And number two is in terms of neo-Cold War. It's a very interesting question whether there is a neo-Cold War developing. In terms of interactions between China and US, there is tension between these two countries, but the neo-Cold War won't be like the original Cold War. In the Cold War between US and Soviet Union, the Cold War was led by armament, building of weapons and missiles. Yeah, that's how US and Soviet Union fought. I don't think China is going to fight US missile by missile, weapon by weapon. I don't think China is depending on its arms at all. I think China is going to use technology as a weapon of power, as a currency, and going to strengthen its technology and use technology in fighting with US. And more importantly, China is going to use the economic clout to fight with the US. Yeah. The biggest difference between the Cold War and the coming relationship between US and Soviet Union then, and US and China in the next future. Please keep this in mind. US was trying to set an order, a rule-based order, a democratic order, a liberal order. Europe was supporting it. That's how US built the order. Yeah. And Soviet Union was trying to destroy that order. Yeah. Now what China is doing is to build its own order. If US came up with a Marshall Plan, I am coming with a Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah. If US built IMF and World Bank, I am building, the infrastructural and the other bank. If US built NATO, I am building Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Yeah. You see China is countering, is trying to build an order that is it's not a destructive fight, it's also a constructive fight in terms of it's bringing a new order, unlike Soviet Union did. Yeah. So that's my fear. Unlike the Soviet Union, China is not going to disappear or disintegrate in the next 15 years or 20 years. So we have to live with China. And we have to understand where China is going and what policies it's following. China may be a greater threat to US than Soviet Union was. Yeah. And then the biggest difference that I see between US, Soviet Union and the US China differences is when US was fighting Soviet Union, Europe stood by US. European Union was standing by the US. Today, US is having problem with Europe. Yeah. And Europe is happy working with China. You know, Europe's largest trading partner is China today. That's not the case with Russia. Yeah. So US stands isolated today. And in fact, if you ask me, US itself is breaking the order that it built. What it is doing to WHO, you know, Trump telling that I want to fund WHO. It's not sending the right signal, you know. So my fear is the rise of China. There is no counterbalance to, you know, like how Soviet Union was trying to question US, but then Europe was standing. So the new Cold War, if we are going to define in those terms, new Cold War, it's going to be a dangerous one. The other point is on India, and is this a problem of India, or is there something else? It's also a very important question that we have to ask ourselves. Is that because of what we did or what we didn't do, or is there the rest of the world has an India problem? Yeah, my guess is both. You know, some countries consider India as an unreliable partner. Some countries consider India as, my God, these guys take decisions. You know, they take 6 years, 10 years to decide a deal. Yeah, ask the French how much time they took to decide the aircraft deal. Ask the Americans the Americans will tell, why is it India taking so much of time to respond, to decide on what it wants to? You know, whether if it is with US, it should vote along Iran. If it is not, then it should not be a part of, it should not be a strategic partner of it. So there is, for rest, India a section, you know, India is seen as this problem. Whereas for India, that India, just because India has a strategic partnership with US, doesn't mean that India will vote wherever US wants us to vote. India is too big a power to do that. Yeah. So India takes its own decisions, and it is not liked by the big powers. You know, this is a reality, that there is a problem on both sides. Perhaps India should be able to convince the rest better, and the rest of the world should be able to convince India better. I'm sure, you know, as we progress, there will be better understanding, and more importantly, better accommodation, you know, of India's interest. In the 1990s, India was seen as a kind of a third world country, a developing country, etc. You know, in the last 20 years, things have changed substantially. You have to accept, you know, US, which opposed us on not because we didn't sign the comprehensive test ban treaty, went all out to bring India into the nuclear suppliers group. Yeah, those countries that fought India in other places, we're now trying to provide some space to India. So this is the growth that India has. Maybe we have to look at on what areas India has got that space. You know, if you ask me, the secular, liberal, democratic principles that we had was one of the biggest strengths. Yeah, I think this is being questioned at the international level today. That we have to face it and then change it, change the world opinion how we are looking at it. Yeah, India has to be seen as a liberal, democratic, secular world that is positive.
Sure.
I'll stop here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We really had a wonderful brainstorming session. I am receiving a lot of outstanding remarks in the chat box. I would definitely love to share the feedback with you, Professor Subhachandran sir. We are very, very happy to host this webinar today. When we wrote to you, you immediately accepted our mail, and you are ready to even shape up the title. You are ready to give a time according to your convenience. And I am very, very grateful to you for accepting this invitation to hold a session with us for about 2 hours, though you have a lot of other engagements too. We look forward to reading more of your columns in newspapers as well as in the journals that you're writing. If you would like me to pass that to our participants, I would do so. that these are some of the journals that you are writing in, I shall do so with your permission. So I'm indeed very glad on behalf of all the participants who have come today that they were able to ask questions of various nature, and you are able to answer it in a way that is truthful, and how it is necessary for us to question about our own nation's behavior and what we are contributing to it as a student of history, or as a teacher of history. So what are we contributing for our nation was also one of the questions that you asked, and you certainly put forward that notion that India should continue to be a liberal democratic nation, follow Gandhian principles, because they are our strength. We should not give up our strength for the cause of strategy. So that way, India has an identity in the world, so we shouldn't lose that identity, that we are a symbol of non-violence. We would practice cooperation rather than small disruptions, not encourage a lot of conflicts, even inside as well as outside. So I'm very glad that we had this discussion today. So thank you so much, sir, for being with us from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would also wish to thank all the participants, my colleagues from inside Krishna Jayanti College, as well as the history department professors. Very, very senior teachers and professors are here today. Some of them were not comfortable in using technology. Some of them have not attended webinars before, but in greater numbers, around, you will not believe if I say around 650 registrations I had, and there are few technical difficulties they were not able to enter in, but we had around 261 participants attending this program at one point of time. So I would thank each and every professor, each and every student of history who still have the joy of learning in their heart, because we didn't promise anything. We just said, please come and participate in our brainstorming session. So thank you for your participation today. Thank you for asking so many interesting questions today. I look forward to these interactions tomorrow also. So thank you. Maybe you don't know Department of History, Krishna Jayanti College, but still you trusted us to attend this session because you gave the most valuable thing that you have, that is your precious time. So I thank each and every one of you for joining us today for this interaction. I also thank my management, my principal, dean, and the professors who have come today, who has given us this opportunity to have this Zoom interaction. So you are encouraging me to consider these challenges as an opportunity to get a greater interaction in the Department of History all over. So thank you, my college, Krishna Jayanti, for giving this opportunity today. So thank you, each and every one of you. I look forward to your participation tomorrow. I shall share the feedback link tomorrow at the end of the session. Kindly send your feedback so that we can grow together. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sebastian, one more time for your valuable time and interaction. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, Ramya.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Let us keep engaging ourselves in future also, sir. Thank you.